Imagine a city, just layers upon layers, right? Thousands of years stacked up. And then within that huge modern place, you find somewhere that feels well, centuries old, a place holding the roots of this incredibly ancient community. That's where we're going today, exploring Old Coptic Cairo based on the material you've shared. It's packed with history and really significant for so many people.
Exactly. And the information we've got here, it gives us a really detailed picture of this fascinating part of Cairo. We can look at its deep history, the archaeology that's, uncovering its secrets, and also, crucially, the very real challenges these important sites are facing right now. It lets us trace the Coptic Christian community's roots and really get why this specific area is so, so special.
So we're going to dig into this material, pull out the most compelling bits about this incredibly resilient community, the amazing buildings, and yeah, connect it to that story of a very famous journey through Egypt.
Well, to understand Old Coptic Cairo, you really need to start with the Coptic people. The word Copt itself, it comes from Egyptos, the Greek for Egypt. Originally, it meant Orthodox Christians there. But after the Muslim conquest, it shifted a bit, becoming more of an ethnic label for all Christians in Egypt.
So it portrays both things, religious and cultural identity, and it changed over time.
It did. And the Coptic Church's history goes way back, right to the first centuries AD. What the sources really emphasize is this incredible story of survival through really intense periods of persecution, not just once, but, under Diocletian, the Byzantines, and then later under various Islamic regimes. The Fatimid period gets specific mention for persecution and church destruction.
Wow. It sounds like a history defined by just enduring faith against all odds. The research points out that simply surviving some periods, like the 14th century, is seen as this huge achievement.
Yeah,
That says so much about their resilience.
it really does. Okay, so let's zoom in on the place itself, Old Coptic Cairo, also known historically as Fustat. This is genuinely one of the oldest continuously inhabited parts of Cairo.
And the material says Christian presence there has been continuous for centuries, not just a temporary thing.
Precisely. You look at churches like Abu Sarga, Sip Barbara, the material dates them to the late 7th, maybe early 8th century. Think about that. That's relatively soon after the Arab conquest.
Right.
It suggests Christian worship just kept going right there in that initial period.
But it wasn't always sort of smooth sailing, was it? The sources mention areas like Fustat being used as like waste dumps and new buildings going up right on top of older ones.
Yeah, that layering, it speaks to time passing, obviously, but maybe also challenges neglect of what was underneath. And these weren't, isolated little communities, districts like Karunfish, where the Church of Venezuela is. Right? They're described as places where different cultures were mixing. So it was a complex environment.
Okay, let's look closer at some specific sites then. Heretzuela comes up as a detailed case study. Why that one?
Well, Heretzuela is definitely important locally. It's a central church for the Copts in that district. But the reason it gets singled out, according to the research, is this powerful local belief. Gets it a sort of global significance.
Ah, connected to that journey you mentioned, the famous one.
Exactly. The local tradition, and it's documented in the sources we have, holds that this site, Heretzuela, was a stopping point for the Holy Family. Mary, Joseph, and the infant Jesus fleeing Herod into Egypt.
Wow.
That belief links the church directly to that foundational story in Christianity.
Right.
So it's hugely important, not just for Coptic Orthodox, but for other Christians too, like evangelicals. The material even notes it's part of modern Holy Family tour packages.
That connection must completely shape how people experience the place. It adds so many layers beyond just the bricks and mortar, and the architecture itself seems to tell a story too.
It does. The material compares Heretzuela's style to other medieval churches nearby, in the Babylon area of Old Cairo. It emphasizes its value as part of a group, a collection of related buildings. You see these common features linking them.
And we get real details about its condition now. What does the material say you actually see there?
The descriptions are quite, vivid. There's talk of rising water seepage.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, causing visible stains on the walls. And also the use of modern concrete and plaster that's actually covering up older, historically important masonry. So it highlights that tension, doesn't it, between needed repairs and maybe less than ideal modern methods.
And inside, are there specific things the sources pick out?
Oh, absolutely. The ambon, for instance, that's the pulpit, the reading desk.
Right.
It's noted as one of only 3 medieval examples still standing and still being used in Cairo. That's pretty rare. And there's also a well inside the church. Local Copts believe it have healing properties because of the Holy Family's visit. So you have these tangible things connected to deep history and living belief.
What about other key sites in Old Cairo?
The sources also talk about the Church of Al-Mulaka. That's the famous hanging church,
Why hanging?
because it's built right on top of a gatehouse of the old Roman fortress of Babylon, so it looks suspended.
Ah, yeah.
And then there's Abu Sarga, which is very close to the Jewish synagogue of Ben Ezra. And what's really interesting, archaeologically speaking, according to the material, our findings near Abu Sarga and the synagogue, they suggest churches like Abu Sarga weren't Roman era, as maybe once thought, but were actually founded in the early medieval period, sort of, 644 to 715 AD.
And why does shifting that date matter so much?
Well, it really changes how we understand early Christianity surviving and interacting with the new Islamic rule in Egypt. It tells us these communities, they're places of worship. They were established relatively soon after the conquest. It just reinforces that theme of continuity we were talking about.
Yeah. Okay, so this incredibly deep, continuous history. But the material is also really clear that these sites are in trouble today. What are the biggest threats?
The most significant one, and honestly the most devastating described, is damage from the high water table. It's largely caused by leaking sewage pipes in the city around them.
Oh, no.
And the material is blunt. This causes irreversible damage to the historic fabric. There was a project, the Old Cairo Groundwater Lowering Project, but apparently the problem is still there. It's like history's being drowned from below.
So Cairo's layers of history,
Yeah.
the lowest ones, are literally being destroyed by modern city problems.
That's a stark way to put it, but yeah, that's the picture painted. And there are other environmental issues too, pollution from overcrowding, poor ventilation, especially in dense areas like Islamic Cairo. It affects everything, including these Coptic monuments.
And the material even points fingers at some conservation efforts, like attempts to help might actually be making things worse.
That's definitely a key concern raised.
Yeah.
There are mentions of techniques that aren't suitable, like sandblasting stone. Yeah, the example given is Abu Mina, but it's relevant.
Yeah.
Or using modern cement on historic structures. It's just not compatible. It can damage the older materials. And that thing we heard about at Herzeruela and Al-Muallaka, covering original important masonry with modern plaster or concrete.
Which raises that huge question, doesn't it? How do you fix things that need fixing without losing the authentic history in the building itself?
Exactly. It's a massive challenge. The sources note cases where conservation work, even if it was officially authorized,
Yeah.
maybe wasn't done by people with the very specific skills needed for these ancient structures.
Right.
And then on top of all that, just getting work approved and done seems complicated by, bureaucratic hurdles, coordination issues between different ministries like antiquities and housing.
So it's a complex web of problems, physical, technical, administrative.
Pretty much.
So given all this, the history, the significance, the challenges, who actually visits these places and what's the experience like?
Well, the significance itself is multifaceted, and that influences who comes. The material talks about its evidential value, what we learned historically. Its historical value, the connection to events like the Holy Family story, how it shows Coptic culture. Then there's aesthetic value and also its group value, being part of this cluster of important sites.
And these different values attract different visitors.
That's right. You get heritage tourists, people interested in history and architecture, architourists sometimes called. But very importantly, you get pilgrims, Christians who feel a deep spiritual connection, often drawn specifically by those Holy Family links.
And while Egypt is obviously huge for its pharaonic past, the material notes Coptic sites are still a pretty small slice of the main tourist itineraries, though it says marketing is maybe starting to diversify a little.
And for anyone visiting, whether they're a pilgrim or a tourist, interpretation is just vital. The sources really stress this. Clear signs, good information. Because the material culture itself, the art, the icons, the architecture, it can be complex, maybe unfamiliar.
Right, you need context.
You do. Without explanation, people might just miss the significance. And good interpretation isn't just about understanding. The sources suggest it can even help protect the sites by helping visitors really appreciate what they're seeing and why it matters.
So Old Coptic Cairo really stands as this powerful physical reminder of the Coptic community's endurance, their deep roots in Egypt. And it's intertwined with stories that resonate way beyond Egypt's borders.
Absolutely. Looking at this area through the lens of the material we've discussed, it reveals not just that rich past and cultural weight, but also these really pressing immediate threats, from the environment like the groundwater to the sheer complexity of conserving and managing these sites in a huge living city.
It definitely leaves you with a sense of how fragile this heritage is, but also alongside that, the incredible resilience of the community tied to it, who've kept their presence there against the odds for so long.
Yeah, ultimately, I think Old Coptic Cairo makes you think about what it really takes to preserve living history. Places where the past isn't just ruins, but an active part of people's identity today, especially with facing all the pressures of the modern world. Environmental change. It really challenges you to see sacred history not just in old books or distant lands, but sometimes right there, layered beneath the streets of a bustling city.